Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me start with the fact that the Trump administration lifted its designation of China as a currency manipulator, saying the nation has made enforceable commitments not to devalue the renminbi. Offshore renminbi was last trading at 687.80, and the point is actually if it was a freely tradable currency it would be significantly lower, and that's the counterintuitive point. But obviously I think we could see it rally a lot further. I remember interviewing Charlie Robertson of Renaissance Capital, and he saw some kind of currency bargain similar to what the US did with Japan, which strengthened the Japanese yen a lot. So that's worth keeping in the back of your mind, and I recall he was quite persuasive in that argument. So I would not want to be short the renminbi now. The US 10-year yield since 1786, 1 year before the US Constitution is adopted, is an incredible, look at that. I mean, the rates we have now are the lowest in history. Apple and Tesla need little commenting on the topic of stretched, says the marketeer. And that took me back to the parabola. It is a curve each of them feels unmistakably. It is the parabola. They must have guessed once or twice, guessed and refused to believe that everything, always collectively, had been moving toward that purified shape latent in the sky, that shape of no surprise, no second chance, no return. Holger, the short burn of the century, Tesla surges above $500 for the first time, as Oppenheimer boosts target to $612. Take you back to 25th of October, which is some months ago, when I saw this short squeeze start to develop, and I said I have to commend Elon Musk for teaching the world what a short squeeze really looks and feels like. So really quite an extraordinary outcome, and you've got to give credit to someone who produces such an outcome, whether you're a naysayer or an evangelist. Then I came across a fantastic podcast on Bloomberg. This is Tracy Alloway in The Stalwart, interviewing a Polish fellow who runs a fund in Iran, and it turns out, you've got to listen to this, that the best performing stock market in the world last year was Iran. And this is even when you convert it back into hard currency, unlike Venezuela or Zimbabwe. But it's a fascinating interview. Trades on a P ratio of 4 according to him. So, take your pick. I don't think you've got much downside, it seems. Home Thoughts. This is the original Mombasa hospital, photographed in 1908. And this is where my youngest, Hannah, was born. And it's a lovely hospital overlooking the Indian Ocean. And I must send that to her. Panthera pardus, brothers in arms. If one carnivore species has adapted widely, it is the leopard, says Parveen Kaswan. And when we visited Mahali, Missouri, Aisha took this 3-second video of the leopard as it crossed right in front of her and looked her in the eye. And she was very brave, I must say. That took me to Il Gotapardo. We were the leopards, the lions. Those who'll take our place will be little jackals, hyenas, and the whole lot of us, leopards, jackals, and sheep, will go on thinking ourselves the salt of the earth. And another great quote, if we want things to stay as they are, things will have to change. I watched an old documentary film which was banned for many years about Sikkim by Satyajit Ray, who remains one of my favorite film directors of all time. Perveen again tweeted this WhatsApp message, a 5-year-old boy listening to Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and it's really quite glorious, and that took me back to something I'd written quoting William Golding, at the moment of vision the eyes see nothing, and I'd said the moment of vision is in essence a non-linear thing, it's a moment of deep insight. William Dalrymple paid a visit to Humayun's tomb and tweeted this, and that took me back to the story of Babur and his son Humayun, who was his eldest son and heir apparent, stricken by a fever. Despite the best efforts of the royal physicians, his condition steadily worsened. Driven to despair, Babur consulted a man of religion who told him that the remedy was to give in alms the most valuable thing one had and to seek cure from God. Babur is said to have replied thus, I am the most valuable thing that Humayun possesses. Than me he has no better thing. I shall make myself a sacrifice for him. May God the Creator accept it. Humayun possessed a priceless diamond, they said, which could be sold and the proceeds given to the poor. Babur would not hear of it. What value has worldly wealth, Babur is quoted to have said, and how can it be a redemption for Humayun? I myself shall be his sacrifice. He walked 3 times around Humayun's bed, praying, O God, if a life may be exchanged for a life, I who am Babur, I give my life and my being for a Humayun. A few minutes later he cried, we have borne it away, we have borne it away. And sure enough, from that moment Babur began to sicken, while Humayun grew slowly well. Babur died near Agra in 1530, and William was visiting Humayun's tomb. He's also written a tremendous article in the Financial Times on the Treasures of Algeria, climbing the rolling hills around Constantine in Algeria. Last July, we paused at the top of a ridge. It was a warm summer evening, and we looked down through the golden haze at the newly harvested fields stretching out below. The panorama around us could have been southern Tuscany, olive groves and vineyards, ripe fields of barley, rising to low hills patched with orchards. In the distance were higher mountains, and here and there you could see the nests of long-legged storks perilously perched atop telegraph poles, street lights and minarets. This was not far from where St. Augustine of Hippo once played as a boy in the days when North Africa provided 1/3 of the grain and nearly half the olive oil of the Roman Empire. He then visits a tomb which commemorates a local boy who rose to high office in Roman service, a Berber cavalry commander, Quintus Lollius Iubicus. His consulship was granted in 136 AD, after which he governed Germania. Then soon after Hadrian's death, he was sent westward to the furthest and most uncivilized extremity of the empire, becoming the first African governor of Britain. The story of the apex of his brilliant career is told in a second inscription found at the somewhat unlikely site of Balmuldy, just to the north of Glasgow. Wealthy North Africans who crushed the Caledonian resistance and seized North Britain for the Romans. By the end of the 2nd century, 1/3 of the Roman Senate was North African, while the Emperor Septimius Severus grew up a little to the east in Leptis Magna, now in modern Libya. Across the Algerian hills we saw the ruins of rich Roman city after city, all filled with the most fashionable accessories, running water hippo-coursed heating, private rain-fed cisterns and opulent latrines, and all the amenities that riches could bring, elegant temples to the local Severan dynasty, now deified, and palatial bathhouses, triumphal arches and theatres that once rang with the sound of plays by Plautus and Terence. Each had a well-appointed houses of pleasure and amphorae-filled houses of Bacchus. In both cities it was the mosaics which most immediately brought to life a lost and attractively decadent world. An inscription at Timgad summed up the life these people once aspired to: the hunt, the baths, play and laughter. That's the life for me. Before I began researching my Algerian travels, I don't think I ever heard of Tlemcen. Yet what is left of the palaces and mosques there bears witness to a courtly culture every bit as extraordinary as that of Al-Andalus. Up on a hill lies the Sufi shrine of Sidi Boumediene, and a college where the great Arab philosopher, historian and political theorist Ibn Khaldun once taught. Then he's describing how a lot of folks essentially defected when Charles II sent one Captain Hamilton to ransom a group who had been enslaved on the Barbary coast. They all refused to return. The men had converted to Islam, risen in the ranks, and were now partaking of the prosperous success of the Turks, living in a style to which they could not possibly have aspired back home, in a society they found to be every bit as sophisticated as their own and a great deal more tolerant. Captain Hamilton was forced to return empty-handed. They are tempted to forsake their God for the love of Turkish women, he wrote in his official report. Such ladies are, he added, generally very beautiful. And then in the apartment of the Corsair Admiral Barbarossa, the level of luxuries raised several more notches. Imported Iznik tiles from the Ottoman homelands clad the walls with yellow tulips, blue narcissus, and red-dotted Sintamani patterns. Above, sunbursts explode across the wooden roof in red and orange solar ripples. I'm still waiting for his latest book to come to the Muthaiga Library, and I'm looking forward to that. I've read all the other ones, they're fantastic. This is the Roman ruins at Jamila, which was the centre for a wealthy agricultural elite. This is the countryside near Tidis, the hometown of Quintus Lollius Urbicus, who rose under Emperor Hadrian to eventually become the governor of Roman Britain. This is a Roman mosaic in Constantine. This is Dar Aziza, one of several palatial buildings in the capital, formerly used by the Dey of Algiers. And finally, this is the Mechua in Tlemcen, the Algerian Alhambra. Looks well worth visiting. Political reflections: separatists are poo-poo heads and stinky butts as Chinese diplomats. That took me back to my article, China at 70, when Xi Jinping said, unity is iron and steel, unity is a source of strength, complete reunification of the motherland is an inevitable trend, no one and no force can ever stop it, he added. And Wang, who was here playing drums in Burundi, those who split the country will be doomed to leave a stink for 10,000 years, he said. China passed an anti-succession law in Tier 5 which authorizes the use of force against Taiwan if China judges it to have succeeded. Taiwan says it is already an independent country. Call the Republic of China its official name. Wang must face up to reality and stop believing his own lies. That's Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council. So I think, it's in a standoff, it's in an impasse. The logic of protest must be founded not on quarrels or arguments, but on the creative power of dialectics. Amartya Sen in Indian Express Before we protest, I believe it is critical that we understand exactly what it is that we're protesting against. The logic of protest must be founded not on quarrels or arguments, but on the creative power of dialectics. He did that fantastic interview in the New Yorker, which I spent a lot of time talking about. Really a fascinating fellow. My first article of the year was the assassination, the escalation of the shadow war. I came across some super photographs and magnum photos from Nusha Tabakolian. This is Iranians ironically celebrating on the streets of Tehran and other cities following the announcement of the historical nuclear deal in Vienna. That was Tehran, July 14, 2015. Here you see Iranian paramilitary Basij forces reenacting the Iran-Iraq War 1980 to 1988 in the south of Tehran. That was in 2015. That's Nusha Tabakolian again. That took me back to Soleimani. The battlefield is mankind's lost paradise, the paradise in which morality and human conduct are at their highest, he said. One type of paradise that men imagine is about streams, beautiful maidens, and lush landscape. But there is another kind of paradise, the battlefield. The front, he said, was the lost paradise of the human beings. My second article of the year was 2020, opens with a bang. And I was writing about Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. Nassim Taleb referenced another Coppola film, The Godfather, and I ended up watching both 1 and 2 yesterday, again after many years, and they really are remarkable cinema, I must admit. The article, I've already been through it in a podcast. That podcast is linked on the front page of the website if you're interested in having a look. 25th of November, I was talking about the alliance of Secretary Pompeo, the MAGA tweet army, Mariam Rajavi, and the MEK, and I said, it's just not credible, it's incredible. Well, into that group, you've got to add Reza Pahlavi Jr., who is expected at the Hudson Institute tomorrow. And he's not credible either, I'm afraid. Trump borrowed an old Persian trick, put the head of a horse in the enemy's bed, said Nassim Taleb, and of course he's referring to The Godfather, which were, one of the best cinematic sequences ever. We have a full-blown insurgency on our hands, says Rashid Abdi, talking about Kenya. And I don't think he's wrong. The Queen has met with Prince Charles and her grandsons William and Harry at what was dubbed the Sandringham Summit, and apparently has reached some kind of compromise. And finally, one more photograph from Nusha Tabakolian, Pieraccini village on the way to Shushtar city. William Barr, Trump's sword and shield, writes the New Yorker. Attorney General William Barr appeared at Notre Dame Law School to make a case for ideological warfare. Before an assembly of students and faculty, Barr claimed that the organized destruction of religion was underway in the United States. Secularists and their allies among the progressives have marshaled all the force of mass communications, popular culture, the entertainment industry, and academia in an unremitting assault on religion and traditional values, he said. Barr, a conservative Catholic, blamed the spread of secularism and moral relativism for a rise in virtually every measure of social pathology, from the wreckage of the family to record levels of depression and mental illness, dispirited young people, soaring suicide rates, increasing numbers of angry and alienated young males, an increase in senseless violence, and a deadly drug epidemic. Trump does not share Barr's long-standing concern about the role of religion in civic life, though he often says that the Bible is his favourite book. When he was asked which testament he preferred, he answered, the whole Bible is incredible. Barr, of of course, issued a statement misrepresenting its findings and arguing that the evidence in the Russia probe was consistently exculpatory, leaving out the fact that 5 people connected to Trump's campaign had been indicted for lying to investigators. Barr's ideas about presidential power have been described as chilling and deeply disturbing. If those views take hold, we will have lost what was won in the revolution. We will have a chief executive who is more powerful than the king, Tribe said. That will be a disaster for the survival of the republic. During his first 10 years as Attorney General, he earned the nickname Rage and Cave. This is interesting. During a trip to Scotland with a friend, he quizzed the owner of a local inn about whether the paint on the wall was cardroom green or green smoke by Farrow and Ball. The innkeeper had no idea what he was talking about. When Bush was being grilled about the CIA's activities, Barr saw a chance to impress the new CIA director. I went up and sat in the seat that's behind the witness, he recalled in a 2001 oral history. Someone asked him a question and he leaned back and said, "How the hell do I answer this one?" I whispered the answer in his ear and he gave it, and I thought, who is this guy? He listens to legal advice when it's given. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. published a book called The Imperial Presidency, in which he enumerated the habits of potential autocrats, the all-purpose invocation of national security, the insistence on executive secrecy, the withholding of information from Congress, the refusal to spend funds appropriated by Congress, the attempted intimidation of the press, the use of the White House as a base for espionage and sabotage directed against the political opposition. Then talking about William Casey, the Iran-Contra affair, he said, "I think the people in the Iran-Contra matter have been treated very unfairly." And then Barr helped expand presidential power. In 1989, Bush was in a standoff with Manuel Noriega. Well worth reading. Even some conservatives objected. William Safire, the Times columnist, called him cover-up General Barr. After Trump won, though, Barr demonstrated a convert's enthusiasm, writing op-eds for the Washington Post in which he endorsed Trump's controversial positions. Mueller's core premise that the president acts corruptly if he attempts to influence a proceeding in which his own conduct is being scrutinized is untenable. Quite incredible, and well worth reading in full. Likes to describe Trump as the heir to Ronald Reagan, but in some ways his administration, with its fixation on enemies and its willingness to bend laws for political gain, is more reminiscent of Richard Nixon's. Very in-depth article. Barr sought out the opportunity to beat Donald Trump's Attorney General. This, I believe, was his opportunity, the opportunity of a lifetime, to make major progress on advancing his vision of an all-powerful chief executive. Let's turn to the currency markets. Euro dollar 111.41, dollar index 97.363, dollar yen continues to move higher 110.03, Swiss franc 0.9709, the pound 129.72, the Australian dollar 0.6902, India rupee 70.8975, South Korean won 1155.96. The Rial, that softened 41473. Egyptian pound, that strengthened 15.8703. The Rand has softened 14.4166. Dollar index 97.351. Two schools of thought. I think it's rolling over. Euro dollar, the lower sub window isn't giving me the all clear to place a green up arrow, but price and price momentum both are pointing up for FX Pip Titan. Sterling, he's posted this chart. Solid black moving averages, volume weighted average price. After hitting TP1 or T1, pound sterling is struggling to move lower, he says. We're currently at 129.73. He says, I'm not convinced price will continue lower. Look for a possible reversal. Gold, which of course touched 1600 not too long ago, is at 1541.75. Crude oil, that's been on the slide, last at $58.07. Emerging markets, Indian bonds get kicked silly today. That inflation report sending yieldings north. David Inglis. I've written about the Narendra Modi economy, which I think is a complete failure. The GDP figure last is the weakest recorded under Modi, who first swept to power 5 years ago, promising to take India's economy to new heights and create millions of jobs every year. West Africa backs French military presence amid protests. The leaders of 5 West African countries publicly declared their backing for France's military deployment in the region amid a spate of deadly attacks by Islamist extremists and escalating anti-French sentiment. Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mauritania and Chad also said they'd boost cooperation to fight terrorism in a joint statement following a summit on Monday in Pau, southern France. Macron called for the meeting last month after 13 French soldiers were killed when their 2 helicopters collided in Mali just as they were swooping in to support troops battling Islamist militants. One of the worst losses of life for France's military in decades. There's been a huge surge in attacks, stoked anti-French protests. US commitment is crucial for France and Macron, but Trump has been backsliding. Said he hoped he could convince Trump to keep an anti-terrorism military force in West Africa, linking terrorism there to the situation in Libya. They're all going to meet again at a summit in June 2020 in Nouakchott, according to the statement. Here you see Macron taking part in a ceremony in Pau, southwestern France on January 13. 2nd of December, I touched on this and I was quoting Salif Keita, who's released a video on Facebook telling President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita to stop subjecting yourself to little Emmanuel Macron, he's just a kid. The main jihadist attacks on G5 Sahel forces, this is via AFP, Yahoo News, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, and there have been some pretty deadly attacks. Then I came across this tweet from AUC31. The distance from Gao, Mali to Dori BFA means the insurgents are operating with men and equipment over 1,000 miles, food, gasoline and weapons off the known highway without public support. How can that be possible? What support would be needed? So it is pretty extraordinary, and what we're seeing is an enormous uptick in asymmetric warfare, not only in the West, but here in the East as well. Tito Mbueni tweeted, if you cannot effect deep structural economic reforms, then game over. Stay as you are, and you are downgraded to junk status. The consequences are dire. Your choice, Africa Report. In this article, the writer is criticizing Ramaphosa's inability to be bold and decisive about what needs to be done, increasingly becoming a victim of his own party's inability to deal with the difficult circumstances of the current negative state of affairs in the country. He made a recent speech. Nothing new in the speech outside of the existing policy and strategy of the ANC. The core of his presentation were the usual talking points. More rhetoric, a lack of strategic vision, and political survival at all costs seems to be the name of the game. This is a far cry from what's needed. I've written about it severally. 14th of October, I was quoting Charlie Robertson, who said that South Africa is heading for a junk downgrade. I think it's inevitable now. A meme flying around on social media is that there is a new sex position called the Ramaphosa get on top and do nothing. That's Daniel Marvin. You will agree that the overall picture is not very pretty. Zimbabwe's Vice President Constantino Chiwenga met with the State Council and Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Harare. Chiwenga said, a friend in need is a friend indeed. I remain of the view that the mind game that ZANU-PF played on its citizens has evaporated in a puff of smoke. South African all shares up 0.86%. Dollar Rand 14.4122. St. Mark's Orthodox Coptic Cathedral in 1968. Photo Hesham Mohammed Hassan in the National. Rather remarkable. Egyptian pound 15.9075. EGX 30 down 1.88% so far this year. I did a study of the Nigerian economy a year ago, and I found that if you're a dollar-based investor holding Naira for a 5-year period over the last 15 or so years, there's almost a 90% chance that you will suffer a devaluation. Andrew Alley in the Africa Report. This means companies have to build extra resilience to accommodate the exchange rate risk and rapid changes to the regulatory environment. Those businesses that have figured out how to operate in Nigeria do very well. It is a very large and growing market. He's right. However, everyone knows how the story ends. I was writing about the possible devaluation on the 9th of December. Moody's informed downgraded Nigeria to negative. We learnt foreign investors are propping up the Naira to the tune of $16 billion via short-term certificates. And I said, everyone knows how the story ends. When the music stops, everyone will dash for the exit and the currency will collapse. Nigeria all shares up 10.4% and the best performing stock market in the world. Ghana Stock Exchange down 0.22% year to date. In my article, I said, let us finish up in Kenya, where we are currently under a plague of locusts and Al-Shabaab attack. The FAO says desert locusts poses unprecedented threat to food security and livelihood in the Horn of Africa. One immature swarm is spanning 60 kilometers by 40 kilometers and was spotted in the northeast. Aerial efforts need to be urgently and quickly upscaled in all countries. Mere total cash released from the exchequer between July and November last year, 855.63 billion. Development spending only 90.81 billion, 10.61%. Recurrent expenses 389.05 billion, 45.47%. Debt repayments 342.64 billion, 40.04%. Mauritius Union Assurance, the largest insurer in Mauritius by market capitalization, is planning to acquire 100% in Saham Assurance of Kenya. Nairobi all shares up 2.81% year to date. NSE 20 is up 1.43% year to date. Nakumat, there was about 4 billion shillings of commercial paper. The guys who will walk home with zero are the commercial paper holders. They have lost everything. With that bad news, I'll take my leave.